Yet another bonus video. In our regular playthrough, we've just completed the Mantid's mission of extracting all the colour from the first two mines. Well, here's what happens if you fail.
Brothers, the ones who doubted him were right. He's not one of us. But those of you who believed in him, don't blame yourselves. It is right to overlook 10 who are guilty to protect one who is innocent.
So he's citing a well-known major principle of law there. The brothers generously opt to save the innocent over convicting the guilty. My failure to absorb the colour seems to have made it brutally clear that I'm not to be trusted. I've already shown off a fight with Whaler, so you know how it goes. And I recorded this a while ago, forgetting to edit out his voice, which would make this impossible for me to speak over. So I hope you'll settle for listening to Fascination Street by The Cure. Since I'm horribly underpowered here with no offensive glyphs and just over 100 droplets in each vial, I need to use some tricks to stay alive. Mantid seems to have a far greater lock on me than most other brothers. He can march up to me with his spearhead telegraph legs. Perhaps they give him some extra seismic sense to locate our whereabouts. But even if I don't move, he'll still head towards me after a while. Maybe he can sense the beating of my multiple hearts. Mantid is entirely invulnerable in his current state, but after some time, droplets will appear. Either one or two, as you see here, and he'll hurry off to feed on them. During which time he'll be open to attacks. It's integral that 2 drops appear, otherwise he'll be too distracted after the first one for me to put him down in time. If I get there first, I can take some for myself. Mainly it's just being a bit cheeky. But in this case it actually gives me some strategic advantage, since while he's feeding he's regaining his health. I can't nab it when he comes close because he's got this short-range melee attack, I'll show off in a second. And now he stands up, starts feeding, and becomes vulnerable here. So I open up the floodgates and start attacking, pinning him down with the colour that lights up in the top right, since that is his current weakness. Then I can use the attack of his to interrupt his feeding. If I approach from the left, where he has slightly shorter range, and then make a hasty retreat, I avoid his blows which would knock the crimson right out of me. When he isn't feeding, his wheel is still turning, so the aim is to interrupt him until his weakness cycles back round. I may as well unload all that I can when the opportunity arises, since it may not arise again. As you can imagine, this took a huge number of retries, since it all depends on whether the wheel will randomly show up with the colour that I have available. Here I just managed to get the last bit of azure before it switches round, and now it's on crimson, so I can't really do anything. I'm quite careful when taking off one of his outer wheels, for reasons that I'll have to explain in a proper playthrough video in the future. I do use some violet here, but it's important to save his primary weakness until the very end, since when he's on his last wheel he'll only be vulnerable to violet. I can't allow him to feed off more than 1 droplet, otherwise his absorption rate will be higher than the amount of damage I can deal, and I will be unable to defeat him. Mantid isn't one of the tougher brothers, and they are all universally weaker at the start of the game, so there's a lot of things that go into making this possible. Here we get to Amber, which was incredibly lucky, so I'm going to pour in all that I can. It's all down to chance. And it probably didn't help that I was playing this with a touchpad of a laptop, so that's not a good idea at the best of times. I use all the rest of the amber since he won't be weak to it anymore, and I'm not really bothered about using excesses in this bonus video. Saying that, the amount of colour I get for beating him leaves me in fairly good stead, so this is a perfectly valid way of playing the game. I prepared myself for this fight as quickly as possible, so you can come in here with more resources. After he's finished off an entire droplet, he fires a projectile at you, which usually orbits you for a second before slamming in, giving you time to put up a shield. I accidentally backed into it, so I take some damage there. It's quite a serious hampering, since it knocks all the crimson out of me, all my attack power is gone, and the game won't allow me to put any more in, even if I had some left over. Thankfully at the end I'm left with Emerald, and for reasons I won't be able to explain until the far future, he has a very particular weakness to it. So even with virtually no crimson in me at all, it just about finishes him off. There's his cathartically gruesome slidey death animation, and his droplet stays too, extra spoils. This is the second possible time you can fight a brother. The first one was failing to remove Sister Death's heart, which resulted in execution in the truest sense of the word. The factor that tips the scales in our favour is having the entire bounty of the mines behind us, and it's possible to drain all but the last droplet and still be able to fight him. Having even more colour and more variety to work with in particular would make this fight relatively easy given these same tactics. Even though Mantid has denounced us, it seems that a show of strength gains you trust, since the other brothers will not retaliate or even mention my victory. Mantid does not ask us to do anything else, so this doesn't interrupt any further events, but it still appears that the developers did not predict anyone gathering enough strength to defeat a brother at this stage. And yes, I can claim a brother's heart as a reward, more on that later. Always back the underdog.